bow your heads. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us here together this morning. I'm thankful for every person in this room who chooses to take time out of their lives and their schedules to be a part of our group to help lift up this community. We ask that you bless our time together, bless this food. We pray all this in your name. Amen. Amen. And please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Let's start out with any guests. Do we have any guests here this morning?
Okay. So Austin's here with us this morning. We've got a couple kiddos in the neighborhood. Police officer with Louisville, so get a chance to buy me Austin this morning.
Welcome, Austin. Glad to see you this morning. Any other guests?
Not a guest, but he just joined the club, Josh Angina. Josh lives in Merriman Park, has a couple of kids at the elementary school, including a second grade boy with the number of us here. So, Josh is our newest member of the club, so give him a warm welcome.
Yep.
We also have Ryan, who just joined today as well. And I just started sitting with him, so I don't have all the details. So Ryan, you've been here for 7 years in the Dallas area?
Yep, just moved to Lake Highlands about 3-4 months ago, so glad to meet you.
All right.
We have another new member introduction. Connor, you want to stand up there?
My name is Connor Barrett. I live here in Lake Highlands, and I used to live in Old Lake Highlands, originally from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm excited to be a part of the group.
Glad to see some new faces around here. Everybody give Torres a pat on the back next time you see him. Okay, before new guests, we got a couple of announcements. Mr. Holliston, you want to start?
Yes, thank you, Carl. So we have 2 more weeks left with the community grant program. So if you're working with a community organization, any kind of club, if they have a capital project or any kind of nice project where they're looking for some additional funding, please work with them. Have them reach out to us. The instructions on how to apply, the channel to apply through, everything's on the website. And like as I mentioned, we have a couple weeks left. We've got some good money to spend on some good causes, so work with these people in the neighborhood to get some applications in so we can help them with some money. So, any questions, hit me up. Thank you.
Thank you, Hud. One more announcement. Andy, you want to go?
Good morning. Spring benefit concert, May 13th is coming up quick. So I'm helping out with the sponsors. We are about 5,500 committed right now, but we're looking to blow that out of the water. So the one thing I ask is everybody here probably has at least one person, maybe 2, think that could be a good sponsor. Get interested, send them my way. I'll be happy to reach out or help you coordinate that contact. But let's get ready to rock and roll. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Mr. Poteet.
Hey, just for anybody interested, don't have anything to do tonight, Lake Highlands basketball's playing. They're pretty good, #1 in the state if you haven't been tracking.
Pretty good.
They're playing tonight at SMU against Plano East, so they won by district and is the next step. So if you got nothing to do this evening, go on to Facebook, RSD, and you'll find the links to buy tickets.
They're playing a doubleheader.
Awesome. Yes, thank
Highland
you.
Park's playing right
If y'all
after.
haven't seen the team play yet this year, they are pretty good is an understatement. They are awesome. Our kids up again on Tuesday. So y'all have the chance. Get out and go see the Cats tonight. Any other announcements from the floor? I got one quick one. In the newsletter the last couple weeks, there has been a link to a Sign Up Genius. In April, I think it's April 24th or so, it's on Monday, is the Family Compass North Star Lunch. It's their big annual sponsorship luncheon. They are going to be awarding our club for the work that we do to support their organization. We have 2 tables this year, and we've got about 8 or 9 seats left. If that is something you are interested in doing, please make sure you get signed up on that. It's first come, first serve. So if you're interested, we've got limited seats on it. We only get a couple tables. It's sold out. Mark, you want to add anything to that?
I was gonna say, for a lot of y'all, this is your only chance to see the Dallas Country Club, so. It's a really well done event. It's one of the big fundraiser luncheons. And there's a guest speaker, VIP reception. There's gonna be some raffling of some items out there as well. But it really is, in terms of, we've all heard deeds, and the guys stand up around the golf tournament. It's the golf tournament, this luncheon, and the lip sync battle that happens over the summer that really are the three legs of their fundraising stool. They have been, like Carl was saying, gracious enough to honor us with their North Star Award this year. The luncheon runs for planning purposes, like you think, about 11 to 1:30. It's easy in, easy out if you need to leave early, come late, whatever it is. But with them honoring us, I think the board thought it was especially important that we have a great turnout. So if we could fill both of the tables, like I said, it's going to be free to y'all. So please honor us and honor Family Compass with the Christmas. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Any other last announcements from the floor? Going once, going twice. Awesome. I'm going to welcome up Nathan Trefone to introduce our speakers today and get us started.
Good morning, Lake Highlands.
Good morning.
Happy early Texas Independence Day. Before we get the program started, I wanted to play a little history trivia with you guys. In what year was the Texas Declaration of Independence signed?
1836.
Yeah, 1836. This one's easy. Just want to test the room. Who did we declare independence from? Mexico. In what year did Texas join the U.S.? 1845. All right, a lot of people know that one. What is Texas's state flower? That was the easy one. State tree. All right, look at these guys. Small mammal.
Squirrel.
This is for all the Aggies out there. What's our large mammal? Small mammal. I didn't know this one. So sorry. Flying mammal. Excuse me.
Mockingbird.
Free-tailed
bat.
Yeah, Mexican free-tailed bat. State insect.
Red ant.
It should be the mosquito. Fire ant. Monarch butterfly. State sport.
Football.
I gotta think older. Rodeo. State dish.
Chili.
With or without beans? This one was fun. State snack.
Takis.
Yeah.
Bucky nuggets.
Chips and salsa. And then last one, what's the state song? Awesome, thanks for playing. Ashley has a prize for one of you guys out there. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speakers this morning. We have Ashley Rill Wheatner and David Lee from the Dallas Historical Society. Ashley is the Director of Marketing and Community Outreach, and David is the Director of Education and Programming. The Dallas Historical Society is a nonprofit organization dedicated to preserving the history of Dallas and Texas. Formed in 1922, the Dallas Historical Society is the oldest organization in Dallas County committed to preserving the history of the region and preserving it to the public in an innovative and informative way. So the organization just celebrated its centennial, and Ashley and David are here today to help us celebrate the unofficial state holiday of Texas Independence Day. So with that, I'd like to invite Ashley to come up and get things kicked off.
Good morning. It's Friday. I have a raspy voice to begin with, but it is, we're at the very end. I'm looking around and I'm laughing to myself. I am the mother of 3 boys, which which is also why my voice is where we're at. I'm also the sister of 3 brothers, so being in a people event is kind of right in my alley. As Nathan so kindly introduced, my name is Ashley Widener. I am the Director of Marketing and Community Outreach. And in a nonprofit, the Director of Marketing is pretty much the Director of Community Outreach. My job is to come and meet with people like you and tell you what our mission is and what we do, and essentially ask for money and donations and memberships. We were founded in 1922. We are the oldest nonprofit in Dallas. We were founded by G.B. Dealey when he moved up from Galveston. He started the Dallas Morning News, and in 1922 he decided that any city worth its salt needed a historical society. So he began it with 104 civic leaders, and for 16 years we were an organization without a home. In 1936, Texas celebrated their centennial in Fair Park. Dallas was able to get the bid to host it, and they built the Hall of State. At the time, it was in 1936, the museum was built for $1.2 million, which was the largest per square foot building in the U.S. And in 1938, we were charged with maintaining the museum. So we work there at the museum. We're in Hall of State every day. Many people do not know that the Hall of State is open every day. Fair Park is open every day. It's a really exciting time to be in Fair Park. They're launching a new park. So if they don't like the comparison, it's the best illustration I can come up with. It's like a Clybourne, but on steroids. So it will be a really exciting time to have that part of the city reorganized and revitalized. In the spirit of Texas independence, this is an exciting weekend for us. We have our first annual Texas History Symposium, which David has organized tomorrow morning, and he'll speak a little bit about it, sure. And then tomorrow night, we have a Texas Independence Day party at the Hall of State, which Nathan mentioned. I was going to offer as a prize 2 tickets. For anyone that's interested, just come and talk to me about it. It's an open bar, it's catered, it's all things fun in Texas and big, and regional cuisine, and live music and dancing. I have some materials about our upcoming events. As Nathan mentioned, we are in the middle of our centennial. Technically it's over, but we're still in the middle. We have our last event in April at Clybourne Park on the 23rd. David's is going to be the meat of the presentation. I'm just here to kind of buff it up. Okay?
Good morning, everyone. When Ashley contacted me about speaking to you this morning, I had a little bit of hesitation because it's a pretty monumental task, especially for someone whose background is primarily education. So I'm going to qualify my remarks by stating that I'm not an academic historian in the traditional sense, and there are people that are far more qualified than I. And if you like this and you want to know more, please come and visit us tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. where you can hear Dr. Lloyd Uglow from Southwestern Assembly of God University, an expert on Texas military history, talk about this battle in much more detail, followed by Dr. Stephen L. Hardin of McMurray University in Abilene, talking about the Houston's runaway scrape, and specifically the civilians and families caught up fleeing east from the approaching Mexican army. It's going to be a fantastic morning. It's free, open to the public. Come down at 10 a.m., see the diorama for yourself, and join us. So with that said, I'm going to do my very best in the time that we have to give you an overview of the Alamo battle and its significance, and hopefully have a little bit of time at the end to answer some questions. I'll also talk about our amazing exhibit. So with that said, I guess we'll begin. In the pre-dawn darkness of March 6, 1836, a weary Texian sentry, standing guard outside the crumbling walls of a Spanish mission known as the Alamo in San Antonio de Bahar, watched restlessly under the silvery moonlight. Unknown to him and the other handful of pickets, approximately 1,100 Mexican soldiers impatiently awaited orders to advance. The siege that started on February 23rd with the arrival of Santa Anna's army was about to reach its bloody conclusion. Why would a handful of Anglo colonists and Tejanos fortify and defend an old Spanish mission against such overwhelming odds? How did the battle unfold? What was the significance of their sacrifice? And why has it captured the hearts and minds and imaginations of so many of us over the almost 200 years that have passed since that fateful day in 1836? These are a few of the questions surrounding the Alamo, and for the next few minutes I will try to give you an overview of one of the most important events in Texas history. I'll also discuss our magnificent exhibit that's on display in the Hall of State. So countless books, articles, videos, films have been produced on this topic, and as you all know, even minor details are often debated by experts, as well as amateurs. So why San Antonio? San Antonio de Bahar was the largest and most influential settlement in Texas. It was founded as a mission and presidio in 1718 to convert the local natives to the Catholic faith and secure the area for the Spanish Empire. It served as an essential communications hub between Mexico and settlements further to the east. So when conflict erupted in 1835 over Santa Anna's consolidation of power in the presidency of Mexico and his revocation of the liberal Constitution of 1824, it was inevitable that this conflict would reach San Antonio. Following the battles of Gonzales and Goliad, Santa Anna ordered his brother-in-law, General Martin Perfecto de Cos, to lead a force of about 700 soldiers to Behar. This would be a show of force to put the rebellious colonists in their place. When Cos arrived, he decided it was a better option to fortify the town than to face the Texian rebels in the field. Later in October, a Texian force led by Stephen F. Austin and Edward Burleson besieged the city. And on December 5th, led by Ben Milam, the Texans assaulted the city in bloody house-to-house fighting over the course of 5 days. General Cos surrendered, and as he retreated southward, there were no Mexican forces remaining in the state of Texas. Well, it wasn't the state of Texas then, the region of Texas. I'm getting ahead of myself. In late December, Santa Anna ordered the Mexican Army of Operations to begin preparations to march north, bent on reclaiming Behar and crushing the, quote, land pirates, as he called the illegal Anglo immigrants. Now, some of them had settled legally under contract, others had arrived more recently without the proper authority from the Mexican government. Some of his army were seasoned veterans, but most of them were inexperienced recruits. Some of them were Native Americans from the Yucatan Peninsula. I sometimes think about them when I study this topic. Imagine living in a tropical environment and then marching all the way across northern Mexico and what's now southern Texas. Many of them didn't have shoes, by the way. Supplies were limited and water was extremely scarce along the route. Making things worse, sickness quickly spread amongst the soldiers and the women and children who followed the army. Santa Anna had made provisions for a medical corps, but really didn't follow through. So there was no field hospital and very few doctors. This would have been a really brutal march if you were one of the Mexican soldiers trudging across southern Texas. Meanwhile, in San Antonio, the Texian forces slowly melted away after the successful battle, thanks to a combination of confusion, incompetence, and the ambitions of Texian leaders. Dr. James Grant and Frank Johnson called for volunteers for an ill-fated expedition to Matamoros. Now, how they thought 400 or 500 Texians were going to capture a city of 12,000 people, I mean, that's pretty bold thinking. I got to respect that, but especially with no logistics, no real plan for supplies. Needless to say, this wasn't a great idea. But lured by visions of glory and fame, many of the Texians started to join them. Worse than that, they stripped the town of its supplies, and there was very little left behind. Ultimately, a man named Lieutenant Colonel J.C. Neal was left with about 100 men, many of them poorly clothed, and as I said, with very few supplies. The embryonic Texas government itself was divided at this time. And there was a split between the first Texas governor. Now here's a trivia question for you. Anybody know who the first governor of Texas was? It's a trick question, so a man named Henry Smith. Wasn't Sam Houston. He threatened to dissolve the Provisional Council, which had been elected to formulate a plan. At this time, independence had not been declared, and that issue was still controversial. And in turn, the Provisional Council threatened to impeach him. So, sounds kind of like politics today.
Was this seat of government, was this Washington or Nebraska?
That is where they were meeting, yes, sir. Neil wrote to both the governments. I guess he was hedging his bets to the governor and to the council, but neither one of them was willing or able to help provide reinforcements or supplies at that time. He did concentrate his men in the Alamo. He realized with 100 men, the city was too large to defend properly, and started working to prepare defenses. One of the main things that he was concerned about were the large number of cannon left behind by the Mexican army. Neil felt that these were too valuable to abandon because inevitably everyone in Texas knew that the Mexican army would be back. On January 19, 1836, Jim Bowie arrived with a company of volunteers and some orders from General Houston that said, quote, blow up the Alamo and abandon the place. Although it does appear that these orders may have been discretionary. But Bowie was quickly impressed with the improvements that Neil had made and the defenses. And he came to agree that the Alamo, and especially the cannon, were too valuable to abandon. On February 2nd, he wrote to Governor Smith informing him that he and Neil would, quote, die in these ditches before surrendering. February 3rd, Lieutenant Colonel William Barrett Travis arrived with a company of reinforcements. And 5 days later, on the 8th, David Crockett and his Tennesseans came in, which prompted a celebration by the garrison with a speech from Colonel Crockett. Well, he was a high private. That was the rank that he requested. Crockett's an interesting character. He had been a U.S. congressman, but fell out with President Andrew Jackson over his refusal to support the Indian Removal Act. Crockett felt that this was wrong, and he went with his heart and his instincts, and it cost him his political career. Again, I kind of wonder how many politicians today would consider the same action. Leadership was left to Travis, who many of the men didn't know very well and didn't necessarily care for, when Lieutenant Colonel Neil was called away because his family was very ill. He promised to return within 20 days, but of course within 20 days this would all be over. So as a result, in the true Republican with a small R tradition, the men held an election and voted for their commander. Unsurprisingly, Bowie wins, which he promptly celebrated by going into downtown and getting rip-roaring drunk, barging into houses and harassing the citizens. He went into the jail and released all of the prisoners. I'm sure he didn't feel too well the next morning. But he did in an act of, I guess, conciliation, agree to share command with, he would lead the volunteers and Travis would lead the regulars. There wasn't a lot of distinction between them. So meanwhile, while all this is taking place and the Texans are trying to get themselves organized, Santa Anna and the Mexican army are on the march. Juan Seguin's Tejano scouts reported that they had crossed the Rio Grande, but nobody in San Antonio really took them seriously. They doubted that the Mexican army could reach Behar before mid-March. Alarmingly, on February 20th, the Texans noticed that many of the civilians in town packed up everything they could and started heading east. It's a bad sign. On the 23rd, Travis ordered a lookout to ascend to the bell tower of the San Fernando Cathedral, and almost as soon as he reached the top, he reported the glint of Mexican bayonets on the horizon. The Texians gathered what supplies they could and quickly retreated into the confines of the Alamo. Now, the Alamo is often referred to as a fortress, but it really wasn't much of a fortress at all, and it had a number of shortcomings. It had no extending bastions to protect lines of fire. It was a big square. It's hard to defend. There were no gun embrasures opening in the walls. There were one or two, but very few for cannon to fire through. The top of the walls didn't have loopholes or parapets, so if you wanted to fire at an approaching enemy, you had to stand up and expose yourself to incoming fire. And the adobe walls were crumbling and only 6 feet high in some places, especially along the north wall. Part of the defenses connecting the chapel to the south wall, kind of the top right here of the picture, consisted only of a low wooden palisade. Most of these fortifications had actually been constructed by the Spanish the year before when the Texians were besieging the city. However, with all of these shortcomings, Lieutenant Colonel Neal had not been idle. Ably assisted by Chief Engineer Green Jameson, he had mounted approximately 20 cannons of various size throughout the fortress. He constructed an abatis, which is felled trees with sharpened branches facing outward in front of the palisade, and a protected gun emplacement beyond the main gate. In a few spots, there were ditches dug, mainly outside that main gate, which is kind of hard to see. It's not the best map. Come down to the Hall of State and see it yourself. And also fortified the rooms along each side of the plaza. And that plaza is about 3 acres in size, by the way, to give you an idea of how big this place is. It's really hard to get a sense of. If you go to San Antonio today, you get no, I mean, you're seeing one tiny fraction. So another great thing about our diorama, which I'll get to in a minute. Despite all these improvements, the size of the fortress was a major challenge. Now, during this time, there were about 20 guns. A typical cannon crew would be about 6 men to operate it efficiently. Travis probably only assigned 3, which you can do. The rate of fire is going to go down. But that left about 1 defender for every 10 feet of wall. So they were spread pretty thin. After raising the blood red flag of no quarter and being answered with a cannon shot from the 18-pounder, the Mexican Army positioned its 10 light cannons. Thankfully, they didn't have heavy cannons, at least when they started, and opened a constant bombardment of the Alamo. The Mexican soldiers soon learned to be wary of approaching too close, as the long rifles of the Texians could fire accurately out to 200 yards, while their antique Brown Bess muskets were only good to about 75. The Mexican Army, as was practiced at the time, built earthworks, and each night inched a little bit closer to the fortifications. So the cannons are getting closer and closer. Constant bombardment, day and night, shells screaming into the compound. On February 24th, Travis dispatched his famous letter that we all know to the people of Texas and all Americans in the world, reporting that no casualties had been incurred despite the fact they were under 24 hours of bombardment. Initially, the Texians matched the Mexicans shot for shot, but by the 4th day, Travis realized they were going to run out of ammunition and powder, and the Texian return fire slackened off considerably. On February 29th, the only reinforcements that would ever reach the Alamo arrived when 33 volunteers from Gonzales quietly entered the fortress about 3 a.m. in the morning. It took a while for Santa Anna to get the rest of his army up, and so there were some gaps in the defenses, at least early in the siege. And messengers could get out, and reinforcements could come in. One note here is that Travis and the defenders consistently expected reinforcements. This was not a suicide mission. To the very end, they expected that the Texian Army, under Colonel Fannin, about 400 men, and other reinforcements would arrive, relieve them, and drive off the Mexican Army. The next morning, March 1st, the men celebrated the arrival of the small number of reinforcements, with Crockett playing the fiddle and Scotsman John McGregor accompanying him on the bagpipes, which is kind of interesting to me. Some historians believe they used the bagpipes almost like you would use a bugle because it would carry so far across the compound. And you can see that in our diorama. There's actually a bagpipe player. You've got to look carefully. Travis allowed, as part of the celebration, 2 cannon shots into San Antonio, one of which landed in the military plaza. The second one crashed through the roof of the home that Santa Anna was using as his headquarters, but Santa Anna wasn't there at the time. It was one of those great what-ifs of the battle. You know, maybe that lucky shot would have changed things. On March 2nd, the mind-numbing routine of the siege resumed. The defenders grew weary there were too few men to rotate sentries, so they slept at their posts. On March 3rd, Travis sent another letter to the Independence Convention, again requesting reinforcements. But Courier James Bonham arrived with news that Fannin would not be arriving. Fannin gets a lot of criticism for not reinforcing the Alamo garrison, but he had some pretty sound strategic reasons. He had about 400 soldiers, but very limited supplies. And in my humble opinion, I'm not sure it would have made a big amount of difference. So he may have been a little bit unfairly characterized, at least for that action. By March 4th, one of the Mexican batteries, the one facing the north wall, had approached to within a musket shot of the walls behind parapets of earth thrown up by the Mexican engineers. And a portion of that wall collapsed. That night, Engineer Green Jameson and work parties did the best they could to shore it up with whatever they could gather from inside the compound. It was clear things are not going well. On March 5th, General Santa Anna assembled a meeting of his officers to discuss strategy and tactics. But it quickly became clear that this was just a formality. The general had made up his mind. The Alamo would be taken by assault the following day, and the honor of Mexico would be reclaimed in blood. Several of his offers begged him to wait. If he waited another day or two, heavy Mexican cannons, 12-pounders, the pounders the weight of the shot, would have arrived and made short work of the crumbling adobe walls. But Santa Anna was not swayed. He was dead set that this was going to be a bloody, glorious battle to show the rebels the power of Mexico. On the same day, Travis assembled the defenders, and there's a lot of confusion about what took place, but it's clear that some type of conversation took place with the defenders. It was clear at this point that reinforcements would not arrive in time. Two of the Mexican sources say that at least a significant part of the garrison was willing to consider surrendering to Santa Anna, that they had defended far longer than anyone expected, and they were willing to take their chances. Other sources dispute this. The famous line in the sand, we can't say for sure if that happened or didn't happen, but Travis did appear to give the men a choice, and only one of them took him up on his offer. The rest agreed to stay and fight. By 5 a.m. on March 6th, 4 columns of Mexican soldiers lay on the chilly earth surrounding the Alamo, awaiting their orders to advance. The men grew restless, and at 5:30 a.m., Santa Anna sent them forward. The Texian sentries were silently taken down. Travis had sent the men outside of the Alamo at a distance to serve as advance guards. But when that Mexican army advanced to within about musket shot, about 75 yards, an unknown Mexican soldier yelled out, "Viva la Santa Ana!" answered quickly by shouts from the other Mexican soldiers, "Viva la Santa Ana! Viva la Republica!" alerting the sleeping garrison. Accompanied by his enslaved servant Joe, Travis jumped out of bed and ran immediately to the battery on the north wall. Where he was amongst the first casualties, shot right in the forehead. As the Mexicans approached the walls, the Texian cannons had a devastating impact on the closely packed columns of troops. Dozens of men at a time were felled by cannon shots and musket fire, rifle fire. Gaps emerged in the formations. The two columns attacking the north wall, General Cos and General Duque, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I may not be, were repulsed and then merged together at the base of the wall. And one of the reasons this happened is because, again, remember, there are no parapets, there are no openings in the wall, so the cannons have to shoot down. So if you can get up against the wall, there's what we call a dead zone in military parlance, where it's harder for the defenders to get shots on them. So in front of that north wall, it just became a teeming mass of confusion as Mexican soldiers gathered. Seeing this from safely outside of rifle range, General Santa Anna ordered in his reinforcements. Urged on by their officers, the Mexican soldiers renewed their assault, and eventually, sheer mass overwhelmed the defenders on the north wall. And at this point, it was pretty much over. It was a matter of time. The defenders retreated to the rooms along the plaza, but they didn't spike the cannons. The cannons were still usable. The Mexican army used them to blast openings in the rooms, going door to door throughout the compound. The chapel was the last to fall. Some Texians may have requested quarter and attempted to surrender, but none was given. As dawn rose over the Alamo that morning, a hellish landscape of broken bodies bore mute testimony to the bravery of both the attackers and the defenders. As many as 600 Mexican soldiers were killed in the attack, and all of the defenders, of course, perished or were executed in the aftermath. So what did this accomplish? What's the greater purpose of this? Well, a lot of historians for a long time said that Houston used this time to retrain and organize and recruit an army. But Dr. Stephen Hardin disagrees with this because Houston was at the Independence Convention at that time and hadn't been given command of the entire Texian forces. Well, what it did do was it allowed the Texians to get their act together and form a functioning government, declare independence on March 2nd, and it unified the colonists as they had not been before. One of the things about the Texas Revolution is it didn't start out as a revolution for independence, and a large number of the original colonists were fighting for the Constitution of 1824 as part of a larger Mexican Civil War. But there was no doubt after this battle, after the word got out of what Santa Anna had done, what had taken place at the Alamo, Texians were united. When he marched east, he faced a people united as they had not been previously. So that brings us to the Dallas Historical Society. And I know I'm a little short on time this morning, but as Ashley shared with you, our founder was a man named G.B. Dealey, editor and owner of the Dallas Morning News. And in 1909, he funded the construction of a half-size replica of the Alamo at Fair Park. In a letter to the park board explaining his reasons for the project, he said, and I quote, "The great mass of people in North Texas never have the opportunity to see the Alamo, but they can see and study this exact replica of the original, and thus will be created or augmented in the minds of the younger generation a patriotic feeling and pride for the noble band which fought and died for the freedom which we now enjoy." Considering our founder's view of the importance of the Alamo, it's only fitting that we are now home to Mr. Tom Feely's massive Alamo diorama. Created over the course of 20 years based on research, built and rebuilt as new information came to light, and it depicts the final assault on the morning of March 6, 1836. It's composed of over 2,000 hand-painted figures and extends over 330 square feet. It's quite a challenge for us to get this diorama and install it. It had to be carefully disassembled into 4 parts and loaded into racks in a large truck, brought down here, and then carefully reassembled, put on display for our museum. It was fortunately not damaged in the catastrophic flooding that took place in February of 2021, but this did delay us opening the event to the public. And some of you may be familiar with that from the news. We had just finished a multi-million-dollar restoration when the winter storm caused just disastrous flooding. Well, we're fully back now, so come see us. In addition to the diorama itself, we have an interactive storytelling app that interprets the battle for visitors. And we really hope that you will come down and consider seeing this exhibit and our other exhibits at the Hall of State. If you believe in preserving and presenting Texas history to future generations, we hope you'll consider becoming a member and supporting our work. And in the time that we have left, I'll show you a few more images of the diorama to give you a little bit of a better idea. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. God bless us all, and God bless Texas. I'll be glad to answer some questions in just a second. So here is a shot that will give you an idea of the scale. It fills an entire room at the museum. This is the main gate with those defenses that Jameson erected, and of course the chapel, the low wall palisade, where according to most sources that's where Crockett and the Tennesseans were most of the battle. He was kind of all over the place, playing his fiddle and encouraging the men, keeping spirits up. Here we have the 18-pounder that fired the famous shot in response to Santa Ana. And you can see as the troops are coming over, it's really, I can't imagine spending 20 years working on one project the way that Mr. Feely did. And here we have Romero's column, famous pecan tree, which all the maps and all the accounts describe. The Mexicans approaching, ladders along the wall, and you can see there are gaps, large gaps from cannon fire. And all this was impetuously researched. So when you see like groups of men on the ground, that's really based on a first-hand account that Mr. Feely researched. And then finally, this is the north wall, one of the weakest points where the Mexican army finally breached the defenses. So come down and see it. I think you'll be impressed. We also have artifacts from the Texas Revolution, flag from the Battle of San Jacinto, handwritten letter from Sam Houston, pistol that belonged to Davy Crockett, and some other exhibits. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
So, as far as going, is this a limited time thing, or is it going to be there in perpetuity, and what are the standard hours?
It's on permanent display. We're closed on Mondays.
Okay.
Tuesday through Saturday, we're open 10 to 5, and Sunday's reduced hours. I want to say maybe 12 to 5 or 1 to 5. You can go to dallashistory.org to get more information about our this and our other exhibits, lectures, membership. But it's free, open to the public, and it's on permanent display. Yeah. I'd hate to have to move it. I wasn't involved the first time, but it was an undertaking. Any other questions about the exhibit or the Alamo? Or? Thank you so much.
Thank you, David and Ashley, for coming out today. And as a token of our appreciation, we guys got you a little historical artifact. Oh, thank you. Let's give David and Ashley one round of applause. So Carlin had to sneak out, so I'll wrap things up. Want to thank, where's Austin? There he is. Austin, thanks for coming out. I know we've got your application. You should hopefully welcome you here soon. Also, Connor, Ryan, and Josh, welcome. Glad to have you guys. If there's no other announcements from the floor, we'll go have an awesome Friday.